Have you ever heard someone say something and just knew deep down that they had already given up on themselves? Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet way they spoke, in the words they chose, the excuses they repeated. Sometimes, the most dangerous self-minus destruction doesn't come from action, it comes from speech. From subtle phrases that sound innocent but slowly kill our potential. That's just who I am. Real men don't talk about feelings. It's not my fault. I deserve better. That's not my job. It is what it is. Each of these 6 phrases feels like a defense. But they're not walls of strength. They're cages. Each time a man says them, he chips away at his own integrity, discipline, and dignity without even realizing it. In this series, we're going to dissect each one. And more importantly, replace them with stronger, wiser, and more grounded truths from the teachings of Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and the quiet wisdom of everyday life. Because words are not harmless. They are habits. They are philosophies made audible. And if we don't become conscious of what we say, we slowly become prisoners of our own language. So let's begin with a phrase that sounds like honesty, but is actually resignation. That's just who I am. On the surface, it sounds strong, confident, certain. But dig deeper and you'll find something else entirely. You'll find fear. You'll find a man who stopped growing, who's confused rigidity with identity, who's traded self-minus mastery for the comfort of being unchanged. Stoicism teaches us the opposite. Seneca said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." That is not a suggestion, it is a demand. Because to say, "That's just who I am," is to build a prison out of your past. It's to declare that who you were yesterday is all you'll ever be. That the man who failed to communicate, who struggled to change, who avoided discomfort is the final version of you. But you are not a finished product. You are not stone. You are still being shaped if you allow it. Brian didn't allow it. For 5 years, he told himself he wasn't good at communication. So he never practiced, never asked for feedback. He let his story about himself become his sentence. And while his peers grew, evolved, and found their voice, he stood still, silent, frustrated, and forgotten. His problem was stability. It was belief. And belief, left unchecked, becomes destiny. But there's another man, Carl. His marriage faded not because he was cruel, but because he was passive. He said nothing, did nothing, and by the time he realized what he had lost, the house was filled with silence, and his wife was gone. Both men made the same mistake. They used "that's just who I am" as a shield. But that shield didn't protect them. It isolated them. And over time, it rusted into regret. The Stoics knew better. They didn't idolize identity. They embraced evolution. Every day, Marcus Aurelius asked, "What can I improve today?" Not what do people think I am. Not what's my personality type. Or what can I become if I take full responsibility? That's the real question. Not who am I, but who am I committed to becoming? So next time you catch yourself saying, "That's just who I am," pause. Ask yourself, is this truth or is this fear? Is this acceptance or is this avoidance? Is this character or is this comfort? Because real strength doesn't cling to the familiar. It leans into the uncomfortable. It chooses transformation, even when it's hard, awkward, or slow. And here's the shift. Replace "that's just who I am" with "I'm working on it." I'm learning to communicate. I'm practicing patience. I'm becoming more aware. Those phrases don't deny reality. They direct it. They remind you that who you are is not fixed. It is forged by effort, by insight, by honest self-minus examination. So ask yourself, who are you becoming through your choices? And are your words helping you grow or holding you back? That's where we begin. With language that keeps us stuck or sets us free. Let's talk about a phrase that has damaged generations of men. You've heard it. You may have said it. You might even believe it. Real men don't talk about feelings. Sounds noble. Sounds tough. Sounds like strength. But behind that sentence is not strength. It's fear. Fear of looking soft. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of admitting that something inside isn't as solid as the surface appears. It's the kind of fear that wears a mask. That keeps men quiet when they should speak. That turns a human heart into a silent fortress. But the fortress doesn't protect. It isolates. And slowly, it breaks the man it's supposed to guard. Let me ask you, have you ever met someone who seemed totally in control until one day they exploded? That's not control. That's suppression. And suppression is not Stoic. This is one of the greatest misunderstandings of Stoic philosophy. That Stoics are emotionalists. That they don't feel. That they bottle everything up and just keep going. But that's not Stoicism. That's denial. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But you can't choose your response. If you never face what you're feeling, you can't manage what you refuse to acknowledge. Silence is not always wisdom. Sometimes, silence is just fear dressed as discipline. Let's talk about Carl. He was known as a strong man. Never complained. Never cried. He was a guy who always said, "I'm fine." But at night, when the world was quiet, Carl would sit alone and cry into his hands. Not because he was weak, but because he had never learned how to let the pain out before it crushed him. Carl had mastered the art of hiding, but he had never learned the courage of revealing, and it destroyed him from the inside out. This is the truth that society often forgets. Men are not machines, and feelings are not flaws. They're signals. They're feedback. They're the inner compass that tells us what matters. Ignoring them doesn't make you strong. It makes you unavailable to yourself, to your loved ones, to your own growth. The American Psychological Association has studied this for decades. Men who suppress emotion are more likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, heart disease, stroke, and even early death. Not because they feel too much, but because they feel and say nothing. And here's the most dangerous part. The longer you suppress emotion, the less connected you become, not just to others, but to yourself. You start to forget how to even describe what you feel. You become emotionally mute. And when you can't speak your inner truth, you lose your inner compass. But Stoicism gives us a different path. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor, a general, a man responsible for life and death, wrote openly in his meditations about fear, grief, illness, frustration, loneliness. He never claimed to be above emotion. He never pretended to be immune. Instead, he faced his emotions so that he could master them. That's the Stoic way. Not to suppress, but to see clearly. To name the storm without being ruled by it. Joel learned this the hard way. As a manager under pressure, he used to shut down. Deadlines? HED snap. Mistakes? HED isolate. People? HED push them away. Then one day, he tried something radical. He sat down with a trusted colleague and said, "I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed." Not as a complaint. Not as a plea for help. Just honesty. Then something shifted. He didn't collapse. He didn't fall apart. He grew. Because saying the truth out loud freed him to deal with it. From that point on, he made it a ritual. 15 minutes a day of honest reflection. Not dramatic therapy sessions, just space to say what was real. And you know what happened? His team started trusting him more. His mind became clearer. And the outbursts disappeared. Why? Because expression is release. Not indulgence. Not weakness. It's the act of lifting the lid just enough to stop the pot from boiling over. So here's the shift. Replace real men don't talk about feelings with. Strong men face their emotions and respond with clarity. You don't need to cry in public. You don't need to share every detail with everyone. But you do need to stop pretending that feeling nothing is the goal. The goal is not numbness. The goal is mastery. And mastery begins with honesty. Speak to yourself first. Write it down. Say it out loud in an empty room. Talk to one trusted friend. Not to vent, but to own what's happening inside you so you can lead yourself out of it. This is not modern softness. This is ancient strength. The strength of a man who knows that acknowledging pain is not surrender. It's preparation for transformation. The Stoic doesn't say, I feel nothing. He says, I feel deeply and act wisely. So next time the old voice returns the one that says, stay quiet. Don't show emotion. Be a rock. Answer it with something stronger. I am not a rock. I am a mountain. I move slowly, stand tall, and weather every storm. But I feel the wind, the rain, the sun, and I remain. That is the kind of strength we need more of. And it begins with the courage to speak. Let's talk about one of the most common and most destructive phrases in the modern world. It's not my fault. Harmless at first glance. Defensive. Almost automatic. But when you say it, when you believe it, you hand over something far more valuable than responsibility. You give away your power. Because here's the truth. Every time you say, it's not my fault, you're not just refusing blame. You're refusing agency. You're placing the steering wheel of your life into someone else's hands. And maybe you're right. Maybe the mistake was yours. Maybe someone else dropped the ball. Maybe life really is unfair. But the Stoics ask a deeper question. So what? So what if life is unfair? So what if someone else made the mess? Are you going to wait for them to clean it up? Or are you going to take back control of what you can do? Because this is the core of Stoicism. Not just accepting reality, but owning your role and responding to it. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That means the fault isn't the focus. The response is, Oscar didn't get that at first. He had dreams. He had talent. But when his startup failed, he blamed everything. The market, the timing, his investors, the economy. And maybe he was right. Maybe the odds were against him. But here's the problem. Blaming didn't change anything. It didn't solve the problem. It didn't inspire action. It just stalled him. And so for months, he stayed stuck. Until one day, he made a small change. Each time he caught himself saying, it's not my fault. He added, but it's now my responsibility. And those few extra words changed everything. They shifted him from victim to agent. He stopped waiting. He started building again. He narrowed his focus, found new partners, learned new skills. And within a year, HED launched again, wiser, leaner, stronger. All because he stopped obsessing over fun and took full ownership of the next step. That's what Stoicism offers us. Not comfort, not escape, but power, the kind that begins the moment you take full responsibility for your response. Marcus Aurelius, writing in The Solitude of Leadership, reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think about that. Not outside events, not mistakes, not fairness. Only your mind. Only your will. That's your domain. Everything else is noise. So here's the shift. Instead of saying, it's not my fault, say this, it's mine to fix. Even if you didn't cause the problem. Even if it's unfair. Even if no one else will help. Say it anyway. Because that sentence changes your posture. It lifts you from defense to direction. From helplessness to movement. And movement, even slow and imperfect, is always stronger than paralysis. Let's look deeper. Why do we cling to this phrase, it's not my fault? Because it gives us a strange comfort. It lets us off the hook. It tells us we don't have to do anything. But comfort is a poor teacher. And excuses are a dangerous refuge. Seneca said, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. But only if we engage with them. Only if we face them with our eyes open and our hands working. Because here's the danger of repeating, "It's not my fault," for too long. You stop growing. You stop believing you can grow. You start living like someone else is always supposed to fix your life. And when you do that, you shrink. Not just in power, but in dignity. Because dignity is born from effort. From saying, even if this isn't my fault, I'm going to show up anyway. That's what separates boys from men. And amateurs from craftsmen. And weak minds from resilient ones. Let me tell you about Jack. He managed a software team. One night, a server crashed. Major client data was lost. Chaos. His first reaction? I didn't write that code. And he was right. But then he paused. He remembered something a mentor once told him. Leadership means stepping in even when it's not your mess. So Jack stayed late. He helped debug. He took the lead on client communication. And when the dust settled, the client said, "Well, stay." Because someone took responsibility when no one else would. That's the impact of dropping the excuse. You don't just solve problems. You build character. You earn trust. You lead. So ask yourself, what situation in your life have you been blaming? Is it a bad relationship? A toxic workplace? Your health? Your finances? Have you been saying, "It's not my fault"? Maybe it isn't. But can you say instead, "It's now my responsibility," and act accordingly? That single shift can change your life. Because blame is a dead end. But ownership is a door. And once you open it, you find yourself again, not perfect, not in control of everything, but in control of enough to start building something real. Let your words reflect that strength. From today, remove "it's not my fault" from your vocabulary. Replace it with, "This is mine to face. I didn't cause it, but I'll handle it. Blame won't move me forward. Action will." Those are the words of a Stoic. Not cool, not indifferent, but grounded, engaged, unbreakable. So when life breaks your plans, when others fail you, when chaos finds your doorstep, don't say, "It's not my fault." Say, "It's now my move." Let's talk about a phrase that feels powerful at first glance, but quietly poisons your mindset over time. I deserve better. Sounds justified, right? It sounds like self minus respect, like confidence, like standards. But here's the truth most won't tell you. Deserve is a dangerous word. It convinces you that you should already have something, without asking if you've truly earned it. It whispers entitlement. It expects the universe to deliver. It creates resentment when life doesn't cooperate. And resentment is the language of the powerless. The Stoics didn't talk much about what they deserved. They talked about what they controlled. Epictetus said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish. Wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well." Now that doesn't mean you accept injustice or tolerate mediocrity. It means you shift your posture from expecting to executing. Because "I deserve better" often becomes a trap. A man says it when he is passed over for a promotion, or when he is ghosted by someone he pursued, or when life doesn't reflect what he imagined should happen. But here's the problem. You cannot fight reality with frustration. You cannot argue your way into a better life. You act your way into it. Let me tell you about Damien. Damien was a brilliant, creative, sharp eye, big ideas. But year after year, he stayed stuck. Every rejection. They don't see my value. Every failure. I deserve more than this. Every delay. Why aren't they noticing me? The more he repeated the phrase, "I deserve better," the less action he took. He started waiting, expecting, resenting, and slowly he became bitter. Not because he lacked talent, but because he confused potential with entitlement. And that's the danger. Deserve says, "I've arrived." Discipline says, "I'm still building." The Stoics aligned with discipline. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in the world, didn't wake up saying, "I deserve ease." He woke up saying, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself I am rising to do the work of a human being." That is not entitlement. That is purpose. So, here's the question. What does "I deserve better" really mean? Is it a call to action? Or is it an excuse to stay still? Because here's the hard truth. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you build. You get what you practice. You get what you tolerate. You get what you step into with full effort, even when the reward is delayed. And yes, sometimes life will still be unfair. Sometimes you do give more than you get. Sometimes you do treat others better than they treat you. Sometimes your work will go unnoticed, your effort unrewarded. So what? You're not here to be paid back. You're here to become someone unshakable. Seneca reminds us, "A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." That's not a lack of ambition. That's the foundation beneath ambition. A man who knows that everything he receives is a gift, and everything he builds is his responsibility. So, how do we replace "I deserve better"? We shift the focus from deserving to designing, from complaint to construction. Here's how that sounds. If I want more, you'll create more. If I'm unhappy here, you'll build something else. If this treatment is beneath me, you'll set a new standard through action, not words. Because high standards mean nothing if they're not matched by high effort. A king who never shows up to battle, his crown is a costume. So, weigh your standards with humility, and back them with sweat. Let's look at another example. Jared felt stuck in his relationship. He was being heard. He was feeling respected. His instinct? "I deserve better." And maybe he was right. But instead of storming out or stewing in silence, he asked a stronger question. What am I teaching people about how to treat me by what I allow, tolerate, and communicate? That question changed everything. He realized he hadn't expressed his needs clearly. He hadn't followed through on his own boundaries. He hadn't modeled the behavior he wanted in return. And once he changed that, his relationship changed. Not perfectly, but deliberately. He replaced "I deserve better" with "I'll lead better." And leadership, real leadership, starts inside. Because life doesn't respond to what you believe you're owed. It responds to what you embody. So here's the challenge for you. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "I deserve better," ask instead, where can I show up stronger? Where have I been waiting instead of working? How can I raise the standard through my example, not my expectations? Because when you live like that, you stop waiting to be recognized, and you start becoming undeniable. Not because the world owes you something, but because you've built yourself into a man who gives more than he takes, and expects nothing but the next opportunity to prove it. So from now on, when life feels unfair, when you've been overlooked, when your effort seems invisible, don't say "I deserve better." Say this instead. You'll get better. You'll do better. You'll build something no one can ignore. That's the Stoic way. No entitlement, just action. Over and over, until your life reflects not what you feel you deserve, but what you've deliberately created. ChatGPT NOI. Doi Alof and 5T panel. I chew I voice over script 6 phrases that quietly destroy weak men and what Stoics say instead. BOIODIVU at 1.500 to an HUYEU cow. 6 phrases that quietly destroy weak men and what Stoics say instead. PA RT5. Let's talk about a phrase that sounds like boundaries, but often masks laziness, pride, or fear. That's not my job. You'll hear it everywhere. At work, in relationships, even in moments of crisis. And at first, it seems reasonable. After all, shouldn't we protect our time, our energy, our roles? Yes. But here's where it gets dangerous. When "that's not my job" becomes a mindset, a philosophy, a habit, a default reaction to anything that feels inconvenient, unclear, or beneath us. Because what it really signals isn't boundaries. It's detachment, disengagement, a shrinking of responsibility. And when responsibility shrinks, so does your influence. So does your strength. So does your life. Let me be clear. Stoicism is not about being passive. It's not about only doing what's required. It's about rising to the occasion, especially when it's hard. Especially when it's not your turn. Especially when no one else will. Epictetus said, "Difficulties are things that show what men are, and what shows your character more than what you do. When no one is watching, and no one is assigning you the task, that's when your principles speak loudest." Let's talk about Paul. He worked in logistics. Smart, efficient, a do-what-I'm-paid-for kind of guy. Then one night, during a system crash, his manager wasn't available. The customer support line was jammed. The new intern was panicking. Paul said quietly, "This isn't my job." And he walked away. Technically, he was strong. But a week later, when leadership chose someone to lead a new team, they didn't choose Paul. Why? Because leaders don't promote people who wait for orders. They promote those who step forward before they're asked. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius didn't sit on his throne and wait. He showed up in the mud with his soldiers. He led from the front. Not because it was his job, but because it was his role as a man. That's the distinction. Your job is what's written on paper. Your duty is what you see in the mirror. And duty is what defines you. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Let that sink in. Every inconvenience, every awkward ask, every task that isn't your job, is an invitation to rise, to prove not to others, but to yourself what kind of man you are. So here's the shift. Instead of saying, "That's not my job," say this: "If I can help, why wouldn't I?" This doesn't mean becoming a doormat. It doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means recognizing that some of the most defining moments in your life won't be assigned to you. They'll appear in the margins, in moments of silence, in gaps no one else wants to fill. And the man who steps into that space, not for applause, not for credit, but because he chooses to be the kind of man who does what is needed, that man becomes unforgettable. Let me tell you about Sam. He was an entry-level employee. No authority, no special title. But every time something went wrong, he showed up. He picked up chairs after meetings. He helped new hires on board. He stayed late when others clocked out. And after a year, when layoffs hit the company, Sam was touched. In fact, he was promoted. Why? Because people remembered how he made himself useful without being asked. That is what Stoicism looks like in motion. Not talk, not performance. Just quiet, consistent responsibility. The kind of responsibility that builds reputations, that earns trust, that transforms you from replaceable to essential. Here's a question to reflect on. What task have you been avoiding because it's not your job? What space have you refused to step into because someone else should? Now ask yourself, what kind of man do I become when I lead in any way? Because leadership is never about title. It's about initiative. Initiative doesn't wait for orders. It looks for gaps and fills them with effort, attention, care. That's what separates men who coast from men who build. Men who complain from men who create. And this doesn't just apply at work. In relationships, you see the tension. You hear the silence. But you think that's their issue. No. You say, "This matters to me. Let me speak first. Let me clean this up. Let me be the calm in the room even when it's messy." Because it's not about blame. It's about response. And response is always your job, whether it was your fault or not. So from today, replace "that's not my job" with "this is a moment to step up. I don't need permission to make things better. This may not be my role, but it is my opportunity." Because every time you do that, you stretch your character. You signal to life itself, I am ready for more, for weight, for responsibility. And life responds to that. Not instantly, not with fanfare, but slowly by placing more trust in your hands. And trust is the real currency. So don't chase more important jobs. Do the small ones with excellence. Don't wait to be asked. Offer before the question comes. Don't ask what you're owed. Ask what's needed and do it. That's not weakness. That's not overwork. That's mastery. The mastery of a man who doesn't need credit. Because HE's too busy building character. And now we arrive at the final phrase. The one that sounds like acceptance, but too often hides apathy. It is what it is. You said it. I've said it. We've all whispered these 5 words after things didn't go our way. The deal fell through. The person changed. The moment passed. It is what it is. And sometimes, yes, there's truth in that. But here's the danger. When it is what it is becomes more than a moment of reflection. When it turns into a mantra for giving up. Because that phrase, if you're not careful, becomes a wall. A shrug. A quiet resignation. It can stop you from thinking deeper. From asking better questions. From acting with purpose. And that is not what Stoicism teaches. Marcus Aurelius never said, let the world be. He said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That's not apathy. That's action. So let's unpack this. There are 2 ways to use it is what it is. Version 1, clarity. You've assessed the situation. You've accepted what's outside your control. And now you're ready to respond. This is Stoic detachment. This is seeing clearly so you can act effectively. But here's version 2 really believe in. You feel overwhelmed. You don't know what to do. You feel powerless. So you retreat. You say it is what it is. Not as clarity, but as an excuse to stop thinking. To stop trying. This is not stoicism. This is avoidance wrapped in philosophy. It sounds deep, but it's hollow. Because true acceptance is not passive. True acceptance leads to aligned, intentional, grounded response. Let's talk about Leo. Leo lost his job in his mid-40 seconds. Restructuring. No warning. He had a family, a mortgage, and skills. But also fear. At first, he told his wife, it is what it is. He said it to seem calm. But in truth, he was lost. For weeks, he did nothing. Browsed job sites without applying. Blamed the market. Told himself stories about age, about the unfairness. But one day, his son asked, Dad, what happens now? And Leo realized he didn't want to be a man who passed down resignation. He wanted to model resilience. So he changed the phrase from it is what it is to it is what it is, but it won't stay that way if I act. That sentence became his turning point. He started calling old contacts, learning new tools, interviewing with energy. And he didn't just land a new job. He found new fire. Because when you believe your actions matter, you start to matter to yourself again. That's what most men forget. Apathy doesn't just rob you of results. It robs you of identity. You don't stop because life is hard. You stop because you've convinced yourself it no longer matters. But the Stoic says, it always matters. Not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because your dignity is built in the effort. Seneca reminds us, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. One of the biggest wastes. Telling yourself the lie that you can't influence what happens next. Even when the world is spinning, you have influence over your mind, your choices, your tone. Even in grief. Even in loss. Even in the quiet disappointment that things didn't turn out the way you hoped. There is still always this question. Now what? Now, who do I choose to be? That is the question. It is what it is must lead to. Otherwise, It's just a full stop on a sentence that was meant to keep going. Here's the mental refrain I use every time I'm tempted to give up. Yes, it is what it is. But what will I do with it? That's where life is created. That's where men grow. Not in the explanation, but in the engagement. Because truth without action is just commentary. Let's go further. Sometimes it is what it is shows up in relationships. A partner drifts away. A friend betrays you. You tell yourself it is what it is. And maybe it is. But don't stop there. Ask, what does this reveal about me? What part of me needs strengthening? How can I still lead with honor, even in disappointment? Because giving up emotionally isn't stoicism. It's self-minus protection. And the Stoic doesn't live behind walls. He stands in the storm and remains. So here's the practice. Next time you hear yourself say it is what it is, pause. Add one of these. And now I choose how to respond. But that doesn't mean I'm powerless. Yet I still have work to do. And I will not be defined by this. Turn the full stop into a comma. Turn resignation into responsibility. That's the final lesson. None of these phrases are fatal by themselves. It's what follows them that shapes you. You can say that's just who I am, but finish with I'm damn working on it. You can say real men don't talk about feelings, but strong men understand themselves. You can say it's not my fault, but declare yet it's my move. You can say I deserve better, but affirm and build toward it. You can say that's not my job, but ask but can I let anyway. You can say it is what it is, but choose it now. Let's begin again. That's the power of awareness. That's the beauty of choice. That's the path of the modern Stoic. Not to speak less, but to speak with more weight, more alignment, more ownership. Because in the end, your words shape your days, and your days shape your destiny. So speak like someone who's building something that matters, and let the world hear not just your voice, but your virtue. If this series opens something inside you, share it. Not just online, but in the way you lead, respond, and speak. Because we don't rise by speaking louder. We rise by speaking clearer and walking stronger. Your voice is your life spoken. Let it carry wisdom. Let it carry truth. Let it carry you. So far, we've dissected 6 deadly phrases. 6 ways men unknowingly sabotage their strength through everyday language. But what if I told you those aren't the only ones? There are other phrases so common, so quietly accepted, that we don't even question them anymore. But they carry weight. They shape thought. And they silently train us to retreat from power instead of rise into it. Today, we go deeper. 6 more phrases. Each one sounds harmless. But each one reveals a crack in character, a place where clarity, courage, and command have been replaced by something weaker. Let's begin with one of the most subtle lies we tell ourselves. 1. That's just how life is. You'll hear this from tired men. Men who once tried, but failed. Men who we stopped pushing, stopped questioning, stopped growing. And at first glance, it sounds like realism. But it's not. It's resignation dressed as wisdom. Marcus Aurelius never said, that's just how life is. He said, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Life is hard. But that's not a reason to check out. That's a reason to step in. Next time you catch yourself saying that's just how life is, follow it with, and then build for it. Because if the obstacle is the way, then the discomfort is the invitation. And the challenge is not a signal to stop, it's the sign you're exactly where you should be. 2. I can't help it. You hear this when a man explodes in anger. When he lies, cheats, numbs, avoids, reacts. He shrugs and says, I can't help it. But Stoicism is built on one sacred idea. You always have the power to pause, to reflect, to choose. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. So what does I can't help it really mean? It means I haven't trained. It means I haven't practiced discipline long enough to choose better. But the solution isn't shame. It's training. Every time you pause instead of react. Every time you breathe instead of explode. Every time you step back before stepping forward. You strengthen your ability to help it. So replace I can't help it with, that was me on autopilot. I'm switching back to manual. And keep switching back over and over. Until your highest self becomes your default self. 3. It's too late for me. Some men whisper this quietly. In their 30 seconds. Their 40 seconds. Their 60 seconds. They've lived. They've lost. And now, they believe the clock has run out. But the Stoic asks, too late for what? For perfection? Maybe. But for progress? For courage? For meaning? Never. Seneca began writing his deepest works late in life. Marcus kept journaling until his final days. Because wisdom doesn't care about your age, only your willingness. So if the voice in your head says, it's too late, respond with, if I have one more day, I have one more shot. Because as long as you're breathing, there's something left to build. And someone you haven't yet become. That's just how I was raised. This one feels honest. And maybe it is. But it's also dangerous. Because your upbringing is not your life sentence. It's your starting line. Yes, your father may have been cold. Your environment may have lacked discipline, warmth, structure, affection. But the Stoics believed in internal governance, not inherited excuses. You may have been raised a certain way, but you get to raise yourself again. Each choice, each habit, each moment of awareness. So instead of that's just how I was raised, say, that's where I began. It's not where I'll end. Because you can't rewrite the past. But you can absolutely decide who walks into your future. 5. Nobody understands me. This one comes from pain. From isolation. From the sense that you're already carrying things no one sees. And you might be right. You might be walking with burdens others can't comprehend. But the danger in this phrase is that it becomes a wall. A reason to stop opening up. A reason to stop seeking help. A reason to retreat into loneliness. And the Stoics did not glorify isolation. They believed in facing life, not fleeing from it. So the better truth is this. Yes, people may not fully understand you, but that doesn't mean connection is impossible. Try this. Instead of nobody understands me, say, you'll explain myself more clearly. You'll find those worth explaining myself to. You'll live in a way that invites understanding without demanding it. Because connection isn't towed. It's built through clarity, vulnerability, and presence. 6. That's not fair. This one is the anthem of the bitter. And let's be honest, sometimes life isn't fair. The best don't always win. The kind don't always get love. The strong don't always rise. But here's the Stoic answer. Fairness is not your metric. Virtue is. Marcus Aurelius never once wrote about fairness. He wrote about duty, discipline, reason, acceptance. Because fairness is about the external. Virtue is about the internal. And when you shift your focus inward, you stop needing life to be fair. Because you become strong enough to respond either way. So when you feel the injustice rise in your chest, pause and say, it may not be fair, but I'm still responsible for who I become next. That's how you win. Not through justice in the world, but through justice within yourself. So now we have 12 phrases. 12 quiet declarations of weakness. But here's the good news. Every single one is a choice. Every single one can be interrupted, rewritten, replaced. Not through slogans, not through surface-minus level affirmations, but through awareness, practice, repetition, and resolve. You want to sound stronger? Start thinking stronger. You want to speak with weight? Train your mind to see clearly, your heart to stay open, and your body to stay steady. Because in the end, it's not about sounding stoic. It's about becoming someone whose very presence communicates calm, command, and character even in silence. And when you speak, let it be the sound of a man who's done the inner work, who's burned through excuses, who chooses words not to control others, but to keep himself aligned. That is power. That is virtue. That is the voice of a modern Stoic. It's one thing to know the phrases that weaken us, to catch them in the moment, to say, I shouldn't say that. But knowledge isn't transformation. Because even if you change your language, if your mindset is still reactive, if your body is still anxious, if your values are still unclear, the words won't land with weight. They'll sound right, but feel hollow. That's why today is different. Today, we shift from awareness to training. We build your Stoic voice, not the one you use to impress people, but the one that guides your life from the inside out. This voice is calm. It is grounded. It does not beg. It does not boast. It does not fear silence. It speaks only when necessary. And when it does, every word carries intention. How do you build that? You build it through practice, through quiet, daily rituals, through small acts of self-minus governance repeated until they become instinct. Let's begin. 1. The morning reset before the world enters, I will center. Each morning, before the noise begins, take 10 minutes for your mind. No phone, no news, no distraction. Just breath, posture, and clarity. Sit upright. Feel your body in the chair. Place one hand on your chest, one on your stomach. Now breathe deeply through the belly. Slow, grounded, present. Then ask yourself 3 questions. What truth do I need to carry today? What emotion do I want to guide, not suppress? What kind of man do I want to sound like, not for them, but for me? Then say it aloud. Slowly, clearly. Your tone matters more than your words. Because you are not just speaking, you are tuning your instrument. And when the day gets loud, you'll remember that tone and return to it. 2. The midday check minus in am I reacting or responding? Halfway through your day, pause. You don't need an hour. You need awareness. Find a quiet space. Ask yourself, what conversations have I rushed today? Where did I speak from fear instead of strength? Did I use silence as power or as escape? No judgment, just observation. Then breathe, and choose one word to guide the rest of your day. Steady, clear, kind. Boundary read. Calm. That word becomes your verbal compass. Let it guide how you reply, how you ask, how you say no. Because when a man speaks from center, he doesn't need to dominate. He simply does not shake. 3. The evening purge, I will not carry this into tomorrow. Before bed journal. Not to document, to release. Stoicism isn't about ignoring emotion. It's about processing before reacting. So right. What did I say today that didn't align with you in becoming? What did I not say that I should have? What fear showed up in my speech? Then forgive yourself. Out loud. I was reactive, yes, but in learning. I avoided the truth, but tomorrow it'll bring it forward. This small ritual prevents build minus up, prevents self minus loathing, and it strengthens the inner voice, the one that tells you, you are not your worst moment. You are what you choose next. 4. The language audit, my words reflect my values. Once a week, track the language you use. This is uncomfortable, but vital. Print out transcripts of your meetings. Record your voice in conversation. Or simply take notes. Then ask, how many filler words did I use? Did I ramble or respect space? Did I posture or speak plainly? Language is a mirror, and most of us are afraid to look. But the Stoic isn't afraid of the mirror. He sharpens what he sees. So adjust. Not to sound perfect, but to sound real. Real without apology. Clear without arrogance. Precise without force. 5. The conflict rehearsal when the fire comes. I will not burn. Tension is inevitable. So rehearse. Each week, choose one situation you're avoiding. A boundary you need to set. A truth you need to express. A difficult reply you keep postponing. Now write the first sentence. Say it aloud. Softly. Then with more clarity. Then again with presence in your breath, your shoulders, your spine. Train your tone before the tension. Because when the moment comes, you won't flinch. You'll remember how it feels to stand inside truth. Not with sharpness, but with centered conviction. 6. The practice of withholding. Not everything needs to be said. This one is subtle, but powerful. Each day, choose one moment where you intentionally don't speak. Let the silence hold. Let the other person finish. Let the space stretch. This teaches you that your voice is not currency to be thrown around. It is a resource. It is weight. And the less you use it, the more powerful it becomes when you do. The Stoics knew this. Seneca said, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." This is your season to train both. The man who trains his voice. You've heard this before. Speak like a king. Command the room. Own your power. But what if real power doesn't need to announce itself? What if the man who speaks least, but with the most clarity, is the man who moves the most people? You are not here to perform. You are here to embody. And embodiment takes practice. Takes slowness. Takes deliberate effort repeated until it becomes natural. The Stoic voice doesn't come from vocabulary. It comes from virtue. From patience. From pause. From pain that has been digested and turned into quiet strength. So speak less. Observe more. Align every sentence with the man you're becoming. Not for applause, but for integrity. There is a kind of silence that is empty, passive, fearful, weak. The silence of a man who doesn't know what to say. Or worse, who has something to say, but lacks the courage to say it. But there is another kind of silence. A silence full of weight, of restraint, of authority. The silence of a man who has nothing to prove, who sees clearly, who listens longer, and who has learned that speaking less often means more. That silence is Stoic. Because if language is power, then silence is the mastery behind it. Let's begin with the truth. Every word you speak either builds your authority or dilutes it. Most men speak too much, not because they have something valuable to say, but because they're uncomfortable with space. They rush to fill silence, to explain, to defend, to soften, to control. But in doing so, they give away their power. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Seneca wrote, "Speech in silence is only worthwhile if it is better than silence itself." Think about that. Before you speak, guys, is this truly better than silence? Most times, it's not. And when you can hold your tongue without fear, you send the message louder than words ever could. I am not afraid to wait. I am not here to impress. I am here to perceive. 3 types of silence and how to use them. Let's break this down practically. There are 3 types of silence every Stoic in minus training must learn. 1. The silence itself minus control. This is the pause between reaction and response. Someone insults you, misunderstands you, dismisses you. The impulse is to fire back, to defend, to correct. But the Stoic pauses, breathes, and says internally, not out loud, "Is this worth disturbing my peace?" Often it's not. And in that pause, in that controlled silence, you win. Not over them, but over your own impulse. This is not weakness. This is the highest discipline. 2. The silence of presence. Imagine this. You're in a conversation. Someone shares something deep, painful, vulnerable. Most men rush in with advice, with solutions, with words to fix. But the Stoic knows. Sometimes the most powerful gift you can give is your attention uninterrupted. Not nodding impatiently, not waiting to reply, just being fully, silently with them. That kind of presence is rare, and people remember it for years. Because we live in a world that listens to reply, not to receive. Be the exception, and your silence will speak volumes. 3. The silence of depth. This is the space between sentences, the pacing in your speech, the moment after you say something meaningful and you let it land. Most people don't do this. They rush. They crowd their words. They're afraid of being misunderstood, so they explain. But the Stoic learns to trust the message. He says what matters, and then he allows silence to do what words cannot. This kind of silence makes people lean in. It creates tension, gravity, presence. It says, I believe what I just said, and am not afraid to let use it with it. That's not charisma. That's composure. And composure is earned through practice. How to train Stoic silence 5 daily practices. So how do you master this? Through deliberate withholding. Here's how. 1. Practice the 3-second rule. Before answering a question, pause for 3 seconds. This conditions your nervous system to resist rushing. Over time, those 3 seconds become a sanctuary, a space for clarity to arise before sound. 2. Embrace awkward silence. In group conversations, let others scramble to fill gaps. You don't need to compete. Let silence stretch. The one who controls the rhythm controls the room. 3. Record yourself speaking. Then remove 20%. Take a voice memo of yourself explaining something. Then rewrite it, removing 20% of the words. What you'll find is this. Less is more, and fewer words when chosen well carry more power. 4. Sit in silence for 10 minutes a day. No input, no music, no podcast, no stimulation. Just be. This trains your mind to stop seeking escape and teaches you that peace does not require noise. 5. Study those who master silence. Watch interviews of men like Naval Ravikant. Observe how they speak, how they pause, how they use silence like a scalpel, not a shield. You'll notice something. Their silence doesn't create distance. It creates depth. And depth is the new charisma. When to break the silence. Of course, the goal isn't to never speak. The goal is to speak from intention, not insecurity. You break the silence when you've fully felt what you're about to say. Your words serve truth, not your ego. You're ready to own the energy your sentence will create. That's how a Stoic speaks. Not often, but always on purpose. Your new mantra. From today, adopt this. I speak only when it strengthens clarity, calms chaos, or carries weight. Let every sentence serve one of those. Let every silence be a choice, not a fear. And when people ask, why are you so quiet? Smile. Look them in the eye. And say, I'm not quiet. I'm just done saying things that don't matter. That's the kind of presence you're building. Not just a man of few words, but a man whose every word matters. In a world where everyone is talking, broadcasting, performing, there is something profoundly powerful about the man who doesn't speak, he simply acts. He doesn't post quotes. He doesn't announce intentions. He doesn't narrate every move. He just moves. And when he speaks, his voice doesn't echo from noise. It echoes from his track record. That, my friend, is the highest Stoic posture. Because in the Stoic world, words are light. But actions, they are gravity. Seneca said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. This is not metaphor. This is your standard. Because here's the truth. What you do consistently speaks louder than what you say occasionally. Anyone can make a speech, but who shows up before sunrise when no one's watching? Anyone can say they value growth, but who reads in silence every night while others scroll? Anyone can say they're working on themselves, but who practices patience when their ego is being tested? You see, your character doesn't live in your quotes. It lives in your habits. The myth of the loud man. We've been sold a lie. That men who talk the most are the most confident. That volume equals power. That sharing your plan is the same as executing it. But that's surface strength. The man who constantly explains himself, he doubts himself. The man who has to prove his ambition out loud, he hasn't proven it to himself yet. The Stoic man knows this. He understands that real power is quiet. Not because it's passive, but because it doesn't need validation. Let me give you an image. Picture two men. One keeps telling you you're building something big. The other says nothing. But you start to notice he wakes up early. He says no to comfort. He listens more than he speaks. He leaves the room better than he found it. Which one do you trust? Exactly. Because action whispers what words try to shout. Why Stoics don't brag. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, don't go on discussing what a good man should be. Just be one. Not tweet about it. Not tell the world. Just be. That sounds simple. But it's hard. Because our ego wants credit. Wants attention. Wants applause for effort. But Stoic discipline means choosing what's right. Even when it's unseen, unruffled, uncelebrated. And that's where your voice becomes magnetic. Because when your behavior speaks for you, people listen even when you're silent. They feel your alignment. They trust your presence. They sense your depth. Not because you declared anything, but because you lived it. 3 principles of silent action. Let's go deeper. Here are 3 Stoic principles that guide silent strength. 1. No announcement, just movement. You're working out? Don't post. Train. You're building a business? Don't brag. Build. You're changing your life? Let your calendar, your routines, your energy prove it. Make silence your accountability partner. Make results your announcement. 2. No drama, just discipline. Something went wrong? Don't trend. Regroup. You were disrespected? Don't explode. Detach. The path got harder? Don't collapse. Adjust. Remember, the strongest tree makes no sound when it bends, but it remains standing when the storm passes. 3. No excuses, just ownership. Did you fail? Own it. Did you lose control? Reflect. Did you disappoint yourself? Forgive and recomment. Responsibility doesn't need a microphone. It just needs a mirror. Daily rituals of a quietly powerful man. Here's how to bring this home. Wake before you speak. Let your body move before your mouth does. Your first act of power is not saying you'll do it. It's doing it in the dark while the world sleeps. Work without the need for credit. Build systems. Refine your space. Improve your health. Let excellence be its own reward. Say less in conflict. Don't chase the last word. Don't beg to be understood. Let your steadiness be the punctuation at the end of chaos. End your day with reflection, not declaration. Ask, what did I do today that reflected my values? Where did I act from ego, not essence? What's the quiet win it'll carry into tomorrow? And write it, privately, for you. Because greatness whispered to yourself in silence is more powerful than applause received from the crowd. A man who says little but means everything. Here's the paradox. The more quietly you live with discipline, the louder your presence becomes. People won't remember the clever thing you said. They'll remember the consistency, the calm, the invisible strength you carried into every space. You won't need to say I'm confident, because your posture will say it. You won't need to say I'm in control, because your breath, your timing, your gaze will say it. That's the power of action without announcement. That's the Stoic signature. One final shift. Next time you're tempted to post your intention, to announce your routine, to prove your effort, pause and ask, would it be more powerful if I just did it? And then, do it. And let the silence after that action be your greatest statement. Because you're no longer a man who talks about becoming. You're a man who becomes. In stillness, in movement, in truth. For most of this journey, we've spoken about silence, about restraint, about the quiet discipline of holding back. But now, we come to the moment when the Stoic chooses to speak. And when he does, you listen. Not because he's loud, not because he commands with bravado, but because when a man like that finally speaks, he does it with such clarity, purpose, and precision. His words feel like a blade, not a weapon. A scalpel. Sharp. Clean. Exact. They don't wound. They reveal. They expose falseness, affirm what matters, and cut through noise like light through fog. That is a Stoic voice in action. Words as instruments of order. The modern world is saturated with language. Endless opinions. Instant replies. Ceaseless commentaries. But the Stoic voice rises above, not because it yells, but because it carries weight. Epictetus said, "First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." In other words, don't speak until the words are anchored in understanding. That means you don't blur. You don't posture. You don't throw words like darts. You choose every sentence the way a swordsman chooses his strike. With intent, with aim, with awareness of consequence. Because words are not decorations. They are tools of alignment. And when a Stoic speaks, he speaks not to impress, but to bring clarity to confusion, order to emotion, and direction to chaos. When to speak and why. A Stoic man speaks for one of three reasons. 1. To protect truth. He sees a distortion, a lie, an injustice, and he names it not to fight, but to restore reality. 2. To bring understanding. He sees confusion or assumption in a room. He clarifies. Not to sound smart, but to serve peace and accuracy. 3. To set a boundary. He notices disrespect, manipulation, or imbalance. He speaks firmly, calmly, to uphold dignity. Isn't others. Anything outside of those, he lets go. Because not every noise deserves a response. Not every challenge requires a reply. The Stoic isn't here to win arguments. HES here to live in alignment. So ask yourself, before I speak, is this necessary? Is this true? Is this mine to say? Will it leave the room more grounded than I found it? If the answer is yes, speak. But speak like someone who understands. This word is my signature. This tone is my posture. This moment is my responsibility. The art of verbal precision. Here's how a Stoic refines his language. 1. He slows down his delivery. Not as performance, but as a sign of inner pacing. He allows his thoughts to and fully before converting them into sound. 2. He edits in real minus time. He begins a sentence and halfway through, if he realizes it's not aligned, he corrects course. HES not afraid to pause, revise, restart. That revision is not weakness. It's integrity in motion. 3. He avoids exaggeration. No always, never, everyone, no one. He deals in specifics, in facts, in grounded language, because overstatement erodes credibility, and truth, spoken plainly, is always more powerful. 4. He doesn't borrow voices. He speaks from himself, not parroting influencers, not using buzzwords, not regurgitating scripts. He forges every sentence through lived experience, not imitation. The power of pausing mid-minus conversation. One of the rarest and most stoic communication techniques is this: the mid-minus thought pause. You're speaking. You notice yourself speeding up or drifting off minus course. We're speaking from emotion, not clarity. You stop. Mid-minus sentence. You breathe. You look away for a second. Then you come back. Let me rephrase that. That one move, it builds instant trust. Because it shows you're not speaking to dominate. You're speaking to deliver something that matters. It shows you're self-minus aware. That you respect your listener's attention. That you care more about accuracy than performance. And in a world of ego-minus driven noise, that one pause is magnetic. The voice of emotional command. Here's what separates a stoic speaker from a reactive one. He knows how to carry emotion without being carried by it. He can express disappointment without resentment. He can express boundaries without anger. He can speak passion without desperation. Why? Because he has already felt it all privately unrefined it. He doesn't bring raw emotion to the mic. He brings distilled clarity. That's why his voice feels clean, intentional, calm even when the topic is hard. He doesn't speak to release pressure. He speaks to transmit purpose. When you speak like this, people remember. Because most words vanish. But stoic words stay. Not because they were loud. Not because they were poetic. But because they were rooted. Measured. Earned. People don't remember speeches. They remember sentences, spoken in the right moment, by someone who meant them fully. One sentence, spoken from full alignment, can shift a room, can soften conflict, can cut through manipulation, can call a man back to himself. That's the sentence you're reigning for. The final standard. Let every word you speak be filtered through this. Would I still say this? If no one clapped, agreed, or responded? If yes, speak it. If no, revise. Because applause fades. But alignment stays. And the world doesn't need more talkers. It needs men who speak from truth. Men who use their words as clean tools. Not messy weapons. So here we are. 12 parts. Dozens of practices. Hundreds of moments where we turned inward. To confront the quiet habits that keep us small. What began as a breakdown of common phrases has become something else entirely. Not just a guide for how to speak, but a mirror. A mirror that reflects the kind of man you're becoming. Because language isn't just how we communicate. It's how we reveal ourselves. Every sentence, every tone, every pause, every reaction. They're not just random sounds. They're a reflection of your clarity or your chaos. And now you've seen the difference. Between noise and command. Between reaction and response. Between trying to sound powerful and being rooted in quiet power. That's what Stoicism offers. Not the mask of strength, but the practice of inner order lived out, one word and one breath at a time. Let's look back one last time. We began with the weak phrases. The ones that seem small but carry deep dysfunction. That's just who I am. Real men don't talk about feelings. It's not my fault. I deserve better. That's not my job. It is what it is. Each one was a quiet surrender. To ego. To comfort. To fear. To laziness. To blame. To apathy. And one by one, we rewrote them. Not with slogans, but with principles. The principle of responsibility. The principle of clarity. The principle of presence. The principle of ownership. The principle of silent strength. The principle of choosing what matters over what's easy. Then we train deeper. The silence before reaction. The daily rituals of speaking with presence. The art of listening with intention. The practice of letting action speak louder than opinion. The edge of clean language measured, calm, essential. And now this moment. not a finish line, but a threshold, a choice. Because what you do from here defines everything. It defines whether this was just content, or a contract you make with yourself. Not a contract to be perfect, not to never stumble, but to never again speak carelessly about your own power, to never again use words to hide, blame, shrink, or escape. Because you've seen what happens when men speak with alignment. They don't argue much. They don't chase attention. They don't try to be impressive. They just show up differently. And when they speak, you feel it. You don't just hear their voice. You hear their discipline. You hear their restraint. You hear the stillness they've earned in silence. You hear the man they built day by day, choice by choice. That is who you are becoming. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to convince anyone. Just start. Start with the next sentence you speak today. Let it be deliberate. Start with the next time someone misunderstands you. Let your pause be longer than your pride. Start with the next moment you feel small. Don't fight it. Breathe through it. And let your posture, not your protest, do the talking. Let your actions become your voice. Let your values shape your timing. Let your legacy be built not by performance but by alignment. Because that's the real Stoic way. To say less. To mean more. To live so clearly that even your silence speaks of strength. And if you ever forget, return here. To this page. To this breath. To the part of you that knew long before these words that you were not here to sound wise. You were here to become a man of virtue, vision, and stillness. That's who you are now reclaiming. One decision. One response. One quiet sentence at a time. And if this message grounded you, stirred something in you, share it. Not as noise, not for attention, but as a gift. Because another man out there is drowning in his own language. Another man is one calm sentence away from becoming who he was meant to be. Let your voice up and find it. Let your presence guide him back to stillness. Let your discipline be the loudest thing about you. Now go. Live like someone whose silence is full of strength, and whose words are never wasted. You don't have to say much. Just say what's real, and let the rest be practice. Thank you for walking this journey. May your voice never be hollow. May your silence never be fear. And may your life speak louder than any slogan ever could.